Welcome to WDH. If you are tired of AI generated slog and want real human telling story, please subscribe to our channel and support it. My name is Maria Tokir and I'll be your narrator. Let's get into the story. His name was Ahano Running Wolf, which in the old tongue meant he laughs. The cruelest name the spirit could have given a man like him now. Nobody in the high desert of the New Mexico laughed anymore when they said it. Not the ranchers who drove their pickups past the edge of his land without slowing down. Not the elders who spoke of him in the lowered voices of the tribunal council fire. Not even the courts at the night. And courts at, as any epic will tell you, laughed at almost everything. He was 44 years old and had not laughed in 3 years, 2 months, and some numbers of days he had stopped bothering to count. Counting required caring, caring required hope, and hope, Ahano had decided somewhere in the second winter after everything fell apart. It was simply a more elegant word for the word thing that hurt you the worst when it finally broke. He lived alone in the house his grandfather had built with his own two hands in the foothills outside of a small New Mexico town that barely qualified as a dot on any map made after 1980. Rough horn timber walls, a fireplace that drew the smoke in the wrong direction on windy nights, two windows on the south side that let in more cold air than light, and a front porch that leaned very slightly to the left, as though the house itself had been listening to too much bad news and had never quite straightened back up. He repaired the saddles for a living. He kept two horses, a bay named Asin, after the epic life force, and the grey mare he had never named because naming her had felt at time to got her like too much of a commitment to a future he wasn't sure he believed in. He fed them every morning. He fed a dog named Cacho, who had shown up at his door during the first bad winter and simply refused to live, which Ahano had always respected as a philosophy. He ate the beans from a can most nights, sometimes with the bread, sometimes without. He drank black coffee in the mornings on the leaning porch and watched the sun come up over the mesa and felt the beauty of it, the way you feel the warmth of a fire through a window, visible, undeniable, and completely unable to reach you. In the span of 14 months, Ahano had buried his father, his mother, and the woman he had planned to marry. Not in any dramatic story worthy fashion, not in the war or fire or any of the great consuming tragedies that the old song described, just in the quiet, relentless, utterly orderly way that loss always arrive sideways without warning on days when the day is completely normal and the coffee is still warm. His father went first. Pancreatic cancer diagnosed in October, gone by the following March, which was so fast that Ahano had spent the entire time feeling like he was running towards heart. Something he could see clearly but could never quite reach. His mother followed 8 months later, a stroke sudden in the kitchen, a Tuesday morning, the kind of death that leaves a half-filled coffee cup on the counter and no explanation. And then Ilana, the woman who had laughed at all his bad jokes and argued passionately about the first best way to make the fry bread and fallen asleep on his shoulder at every single movie they had ever watched together. Ilana, on a wet highway outside Albuquerque, a rainy October night, a truck that crossed the central line, and that was that. Three graves in the red earth, three stone markers he visited every single dawn. Not out of the ritual or tradition or any spiritual discipline, but simply because that was where he had left the best part of himself and he had not yet figured out what to do about it. The community tried, he would given them that. For the first year, people came. They brought food and quiet company and the kind of steady, worthless presence that good people offer when they know there is nothing useful left to say. The elders came and sat with him. His cousin Marcus came and spent a whole weekend just fixing things around their house that had fallen into the disrepair. Old Mrs. Yellow Horse next door left tameless on his porch every Sunday without fail, wrapped in foil, no note, because some kindness are better delivered without expectation of acknowledgement. But grief has a way of outlasting even the most faithful visitors. By the second year, the visits had thinned. By the third, Hannah was largely alone, and this was the part nobody talked about openly. Exactly what a part of him had wanted. Solitude had become the one thing he could fully control. He knew its edges and its textures. He knew how it moved through the house in the evenings and how it sounded at 3 in the morning and how, if you were very still, it almost felt like kind of a company. He had, in those 3 years, built a life that was entirely functional, entirely hollow, like a beautiful clay pot with no water in it. Everything worked, nothing mattered. The sun rose, the horses needed feeding, the saddles needed stitching, the coffee needed making. He did all of it. He did it well. He just did it from somewhere very far away inside himself, behind the bolted door, which has no plan to come out. Some men in that condition drink, some rage, some fill the silence with noise and movement and distraction until they have run so fast for so long they have completely forgotten what they were running from. Hanno did none of this. He simply became extraordinary, magnificently, almost artistically still. A stillness so complete and total that his neighbor, Mrs. Yellow Horse, once stood at his fence calling his name for 10 full minutes before realizing he was sitting on the porch directly in front of her. Perfectly motionless, a cup of cold coffee in his hand, watching the middle distance with the focused tranquility of a man who has made peace with something the rest of the world is still fighting. That was who Hannah Running Bull was on the Tuesday in the late April when the woman in the wedding dress walked down his dirt road carrying a gas can. She was not walking delicately. She was not walking with the composure of a woman who had accepted her situation gracefully. She was walking the way a person walks when they are furious at everything, including the roads itself. Long, purposeless strides, chin forward, bare feet raising small red dust clouds with every step. A battered gas can swinging in her right hand, her left hand holding a pair of white heel shoes by their straps. The dress was extraordinary. Floor length, ivory satin, lace overlay on the bodice, a small strain now thoroughly decorated with the particular red mud of the New Mexico high desert. Buttons down the shirt, most of them still buttoned, one of them visibly missing. A shoulder strap held together with an Hanno would look 3 separate times to confirm this before believing it a binder clip. Her hair had been done up in some elaborate architectural arrangement that had clearly started the day as something intentional and beautiful and had since suffered what appeared to be a catastrophic structural failure, resulting in half of it still pinned magnificently at her crown of her head and the other half cascading freely and suggesting that the morning had been very long. She had dark eyes, a determined mouth, and a smear of something white on her left elbow that Hannah would later confirm was wedding cake frosting. He was in the yard, sitting on the split rail fence, stitching a broken kinch strap. When she came around the bend, he watched her approach with the unhurried attention of a man who had no agenda and had learned to observe things fully before deciding what they meant. She stopped at his gate. She looked at him. She looked at the truck parked beside the barn. She looked back at him. My car ran out of gas approximately 1 mile back, she said. Her voice was clear and direct. It contained not a single molecule of embarrassment. I can see you have a truck. I need to get out of the Ortigia Ranch on Route 9. I'll pay you in cash or in the last surviving piece of my wedding cake, which is a red velvet made by my Aunt Connie, who has never in 72 years produced a dessert that was anything less than extraordinary. You can name your preference. Hannah looked at her for a long moment. He sat down the kinstrap. You're wearing a wedding dress, he said. It was in total the most words he had spoken to another human being in 4 days. That is an accurate observation, she said. Do we have a deal or what? He drove her. He was not entirely sure why. Some instinct older than his grief, some fundamental epic hospitality that has been bred into him deeper than his sadness could reach, had moved his body towards the truck before his mind had finished deliberating. He opened the gate. He gestured. He got in gas. Gas can. He got in. Gas can between her feet, shoes in her lap, dressed arranged as but practically as a floor length wedding gown allowing the cab of a working ranch truck. Her name was Marisol Vega. She told him this approximately 30 seconds after the truck started moving, along with a great deal of other information delivered steady unself. It was unself, unconscious flow of a woman who had clearly decided that since the day could not possibly get any more humiliating, she might as well just be completely honest about all of it. The wedding had been hers. That morning, the church in the town flowers ordered 3 months ago in advance. Her Aunt Connie's red velvet cake on a table in the reception hall. 47 guests in their good clothes, and a groom named Daniel was not just, as it turned out, going to show up. Not because he was a monster, she explained with the careful fairness of a woman who has already done significant emotional processing in a very short window of time. Not because he was cruel or dishonest or had any dramatically evil quality that would make a better story. Simply because Daniel was at the core of him, a man who could not do hard things. He wanted the life that came after commitment without being able to make the commitment. She had known this, she said, looking out the passenger window at the passing desert with a flat, clear gaze. She had known it for probably 8 months, had watched the signs and interpret them generously because that is what you think when you love someone and you're not yet ready to stop. You always think love will fix cowardice. She said, it never does. But you always think, maybe this time, maybe if I just give it a little more, maybe if I love him a little more. She paused. It doesn't. Ahano had nothing, but he was listening, actually listening, not in the polite and distant way. He had managed conversations for 3 years, but with something closer to his actual attention. She had gotten into the car in the dress, in the heels, before she thought to change because she needed to leave before she cried in front of the 47 people and driven, and then the fuel lighting had come on, which she should have anticipated because she had run out on the same road in November, which she was acknowledged. It suggested a pattern that perhaps merited some reflection. The gas can had been in the truck since November's incident, which she considered a personal growth moment, even if it had ended with her walking barefoot in the wedding dress. They reached the outrigger ranch. She climbed out. She turned back and held the white bakery box through the window. The cake, she said, I would play. A deal is a deal. You don't have to. Take the cake, she said, with the tone of someone who does not negotiate after a decision has been made. He took the cake. He ate it that night at the kitchen table alone, and it was genuinely one of the best things he had tasted in the 3 years, which felt significant in a way that he didn't examine too closely. She came back the next day for her shoes. She had left them on the floor of the truck and she needed them. She explained at his door because they were the only nice pair she owned and she refused to let the worst day of her life also cost her a pair of clothes, a good pair of heels. ब्रेक ले ले
लेने मेरी कितनी मिनट की
2 मिनट की
मैं चाह रहा था ये क्या चलता रहे थोड़ी देर में इकट्ठा ही करो वैसे रहे काफ़ी लंबी नहीं होगी
काफी लंबी है ये 13 सफ़े हैं
अच्छा फिर हम इसका पार्ट वन और पार्ट टू कर लेते हैं
हाँ
ये अभी जहाँ पे हुआ है ना इसके आगे कह दें कि ये पार्ट वन है नेक्स्ट डे आप इसको आप थोड़ा सा इंग्लिश बता दें कि नेक्स्ट वीडियो देखिएगा पार्ट टू के लिए
लेट्स वेट फॉर द पार्ट 2 मैंने नहीं बुलाया ये पैराग्राफ दोबारा पढ़ती हूँ फिर
पैराग्राफ पढ़ लिया
नहीं पढ़ रही हूँ ना अभी तो
अभी कहाँ तक पहुँचा था
यहाँ तक
हाँ तो इससे आगे आप इसका पूरा बोल के यहाँ से आगे पूरा बोल के यहाँ तक और नीचे आए हाँ यहाँ तक मैं कहता हूँ
लोनलीनेस तक पढ़ ले
हाँ जी
ठीक है ठीक है
उसके बाद आप कह दीजिएगा कि ये फॉर नेक्स्ट पार्ट क्या कहते हैं कि आप अगली वीडियो के लिए नेक्स्ट पार्ट
Let's wait for the next one. She looked past him into the house with a frank, unself consciousness, curiosity that seems to be simply how her eyes work, taking in the bare table, the single mug, the dark fireplace, the stack of unopened mail on the counter. You have no food, she said. I have food. You have no one can beers. You have one can of beer. You have one can of beans, half a box of crackers, and what I believe is an apple that has given up. He looked at him. That is not the food. That is a still life about loneliness. Thank you very much. This was part one. We'll shortly see you next day with part two.